Hello again to all subscribers and listeners of this channel. This is the Obsidian Radio with another part of the series, Why Evolution is Bullshit Part 3, Human Evolution, numbers 13 through 15. Evolution is the hypothesis masquerading as a theory that people believe is a fact. We are now moving on to numbers 13 through 15 of part 3 of the series. Here I will discuss topics such as human beings and their similarity or our similarity with certain unexpected animal species, the odd and interesting creation myths of different cultures and how they don't quite line up with the migration story nor the evolutionary hypothesis of Homo sapiens sapien, and the curious questions about our consciousness, our ability to think, our mind, and where did our consciousness, our mind come from, and why that's not really explained very well through the evolutionary hypothesis. So that's what's going to be going on in this video. So with that being said, let's continue with the series. Number 13. Genetic and physiological similarities with organisms that no one ever expected and doesn't seem to quite line up with the evolutionary hypothesis. And it's not explained very well through all the science that's come out there as to why we have the similarity with these species. So let's get into it. 13A. We have some structural and genetic similarities with the great apes, obviously. As far as the apes are concerned, the similarities we have with them are listed as the larger cranial capacity compared to other animals, the opposable thumbs, the relatively longer childhood, complex hierarchical societies, a higher amount of gray matter than most other organisms when it comes to our brain and nervous system. The apes, all of us, have the ability to learn things and also be taught skills like painting or sign language, writing, etc. The DNA of chimps, bonobos, billy apes, gorillas, and orangutans is somewhere between 97 to 99% identical to Homo sapiens sapien. These are all peculiar similarities that we have with the apes, some of which can be seen upon a layman's observation. But there's a couple problems. 13B. But why do we seem to have similar characteristics or features to aquatic mammals? Examples such as we have remnant webbing on our hands and feet between our fingers and toes, similar to the webbing of other animals like otters and beavers. We have oil glands in almost every part of our skin, much like how seals and otters do. We have sex organs that instead of having a bone in them or some type of sharp spear or some type of bony projection inside them, our sex organs seem to engorge with blood when we're ready to copulate, much like how the whales and dolphins do. That's a very interesting thing that seems to be more common with the aquatic animals also, is some of the traits we have of reproduction. Interesting. But the most common thing that's connected between Homo sapiens sapien and marine mammals is the relatively thick layers of subcutaneous fat, as in the layers of fat that lie on top of the muscle but are tucked underneath the skin. Almost exclusively marine mammals have that. A small handful of terrestrial mammals seem to have the same thing, human beings being the most common, most well-known one. But here's the problem. You develop those thick layers of fat to insulate yourself and give yourself buoyancy in the ocean. How and why did human beings who are terrestrial, why do we have this? We're land-dwelling organisms. So where did we get these aquatic traits from? If the aquatic ape idea is correct, then why did the ancient ape get into the aquatic environment in the first place? How did it get there? Why didn't it leave there? Why did it stay there that long to develop these traits? Nobody seems to have an answer for that. 13C. Why are we so similar to pigs? Human hair and pig hair is very similar. We have similar structured aortas, vena cavas, and heart valves. As in, they've actually shown that pigs up to a certain size, between like 140 to 200 pounds, they have a circulatory system that is surprisingly similar to humans. And no one seems to have an explanation why. On top of that, like us, the pig has noticeably high body fat. We human beings have high body fat. Even relatively slim humans have a high body fat in the double-digit percents. Yet most terrestrial mammals have a body fat percentage that's somewhere around 10% or lower. And a lot of times they stay in the single digits for pretty much their entire life. Also, if I remember correctly, most species of pig or subspecies of pig are omnivores. And I'm not sure if this is true, but I think they don't have a mating season. So they tend to have children whenever they can, whenever they're ready. They don't tend to have a mating season like others, and they tend to be omnivores, which is why they breed so much and tend to be considered pests in certain parts of the world. Very interesting. 13D. We're the only terrestrial animal that has, or almost the only terrestrial animal that has, this weird combination of traits from both the ocean and the land. We're also the terrestrial animal that uses more potable water than any other terrestrial animal. It's very interesting but very strange. We don't live in the water, we live on land. But unlike other land animals, we use more water than any of them do. Interesting. 13E. And no, the aquatic ape hypothesis, like I said before, doesn't account for enough of these things. Although I do kind of like it, I can kind of see it, but it still has too many different flaws. It doesn't explain enough of how we got the way we are. Again, why would an ape, and only the Homo sapien ape, leave land and venture into the water, where it can't swim as fast, can't hold its breath very long, can't see as easily, or evade aquatic predators? And then none of the other apes went into the water, or did they? Is the aquatic ape theory applied to Neanderthal and Denisovan, or just Homo sapien? Again, what would cause an ape to go into a watery environment like that? No one seems to have an explanation. Also, where did the human menstrual cycle come from when it comes to human females? And why is it a bit more similar to the aquatic animals, some aquatic animals, despite us being mostly land-based? And how did that even work? Is it with the tides? Is it the moon? Nobody seems to explain that. It doesn't seem to make enough sense. How did this aquatic ape survive long enough, being in or near the water, to be able to get back onto the land, and then it climbed into the trees and became arboreal? I don't get it. Somebody needs to line that up, how that worked, because I'm quite frankly confused how that even worked. So how did that sequence come about? Somebody let me know. Number 14. What about the different accounts from different ethnic groups, different cultures all over the world about their origins? It's very interesting. Mythology might not be what it seems. Let me explain. 14A. First, let us understand what mythology actually is. If one pays close attention, there are actually three terms that apply here. There is myth, mythos, and then mythology. Myth is originally the account of something that the particular group of people claim actually occurred at a particular time. Unfortunately, because of the grandiosity of the original accounts and our lack of symbolic understanding, the way words change over time, the definition or connotation of myth, unfortunately, eventually changed into more of a story that's been told by an ancient or a primal culture, with emphasis on it being a story, not so much an account of something that may have occurred. So that unfortunately has changed when it comes to looking at the word myth and how it's defined. Then there's the word mythos. Mythos is the constant retelling of the original stories and or accounts. Whereas mythology, if you pay close attention to the term and the suffix and prefix, That term actually is the study of myth or mythos. Mythology. The study of myth, or the words that you get from looking at and understanding myth. Funny thing, people seem to refer to Greek mythology as in the study of Greek mythology, when I could be wrong, but it seems like that's actually kind of redundant. In reality, they mean to say the study of Greek myth is also the same as mythology or Greek mythology. I could be wrong on that, but I think there might be a slight mistake that people make every time they say mythology. They might mean myth, but whatever. That's a non sequitur. Let's go on. 14b. Now let us understand a basic breakdown of what our origin is supposed to be according to the scientific literature. So, there was a monkey-like creature that eventually became adapted to living in trees. It evolved later to become a more advanced simian-like organism. This species then became some type of larger, stronger, more intelligent ape. This ape then branched off and became different types of apes and hominids. One of those ape hominid type beings somehow came down from the trees and apparently went through an aquatic phase. How they explain that, I don't know. But it came down from the trees, went through an aquatic phase somehow for some unknowable reason, gained bipedalism, and became a terrestrial hominid, Homo erectus, who was eventually becoming more and more aquatic, some of their features. Yeah. From here on, there was a further branching off into organisms such as Heidelbergensis, or the Denisovans, or Neanderthal, or Cro-Magnon, and then eventually Homo sapiens sapien, who somehow migrated out of Central Africa and slowly became the different ethnic groups of people all over the planet Earth. Which, that part I actually do kind of believe. I think that makes a lot of sense. But everything else before that is starting to get a little more questionable. Now let us compare this sequence of events to the different myths from a few different cultures all around the globe. 14c. There are different myths all over the globe about people's origins, and something that doesn't need to be reiterated. Myth originally was supposed to be the retelling of an account of something that may have actually happened. It was not originally supposed to be the retelling of a made-up story. At least that's what a lot of people say in different cultures, that they never made these up. These were things their ancestors actually experienced, and they're retelling what their ancestors experienced. Also, many tribal cultures alive today still see their myths as a fact and not a made-up story. So the cultures such as, for example, the Hopi Indians have a creation myth of Tawa or Tayoa, a sun deity who created the first world out of endless space before populating this world with people. In other myths of the Hopi, they speak of giant bamboo shoots soaring upward out of the ocean. A great flood was occurring at the time. Their ancestors were put on boats during this flood until they sailed eastward and landed near where the Hopi people live today. Again, look at that symbolically and take very seriously that when they tell the story, they don't believe they made it up. They believe that they're retelling something that their ancestors may have actually experienced. Just ruminate and think about that for a little bit. Next, the Dogon people of Northwest Africa in Mali. They believed that first there was nothingness, then there was something formless in space. Then came a mind that had no physical form. Then came the nomos or the numos. These humanoid, reptilian fish type people who somehow created the Dogon and taught them the ways of farming, hunting, family, and all the basics of agricultural civilization. Then there are the Aborigines of Australia, who have many myths about deities such as the rainbow serpent, and how the rainbow serpent would affect the land of Australia, interact with the people, and even bring things like good harvest or bad things like disease. There's also this talk of the dream time, some ancient ethereal realm that only the Australian Aboriginals or Aborigines seem to understand, but no one else in the world really seems to understand what this dream time is. It seems to be very specific to them for some reason. 14D. What do all these stories mean? We're not entirely sure, but they all seem to be tied surprisingly to the geology of the land, and they seem to be tied to some type of flood. These and many other myths all over the world, all over the globe. Now, where did these ideas come from? The best explanation seems to be that these accounts actually came from things that may have actually happened that later were told through symbols and oral tradition of that culture that was telling them. 14E. Now let's look at the story we've been told about where human beings come from and how we got to where we are. First, there was supposed to be an ancient ape. And then you see that whole entire moving from one species to the other, the branching out, and eventually the great migration, etc. But here's the question. Why don't these stories or these different myths from the different cultures, why don't they match up with the idea that we've been told about our human migration? There's a disconnect, it seems. That I couldn't even think to answer. I'm not sure how to answer that. I don't know, but there seems to be a huge disconnect between what cultures all over the world say versus what the scientists say where human beings came from. And it's interesting that nobody seems to point that out. It's like, how come the migration that we were told and the evolution from the ape ancestor, how come that so clashes with what so many different cultures say about who they are and where their ancestors came from? All I know is that it doesn't match many of the features of the ancient migration or what we've been told when it comes to these ancient creation myths. There's a disconnect there that needs to somehow be rectified. Number 15. Where did human consciousness come from? We're called Homo sapiens sapien. But where do we attain our sapience and our sentience from? No one, including the ones who follow evolution, seem to have an answer for this. But let us at least explore what these things are and how they might have come into being as a part of our existence. 15A. What is sentience? According to Merriam-Webster, sentience is the state of being sentient. And being sentient means you have an ability to respond to things around you. You're responsive to or somewhat conscious sense of impressions of sentient being. I guess another way of looking at it, you're aware, you're finely sensitive in your perception, or you have a strong sense of being able to feel things that are in your environment. So I guess a simpler way of putting it is being sentient is having the ability to perceive, to feel, and to react to three-dimensional reality. That's a simpler way of looking at it. Now, 15B. What is sapience? Sapience, according to thefreedictionary.com, is having great wisdom and discernment, an ability to apply knowledge or experience or understanding, or common sense and insight. You have the ability to develop deep, thorough, and mature understanding of the world around you. Sentience seems to be the ability to think, to reason, and to be conscious of our reality around us. Whereas sapience, again, is just being somewhat aware. So the question remains, 15C. How does an organism gain either of these abilities, whether it be sentience or sapience? What in the evolutionary process occurs in an organism that is able to respond to reality as well as be aware of reality and make conscious, logical decisions about that reality and what the organism, should be doing in that reality? How do you get to that process where the brain gets that powerful? I'm not sure we have a good enough explanation for that either. We can talk about ideas of how the brain grew, but there's a whole different area talking about, it's a completely different situation. We ask people, okay, where did our consciousness grow from? because that's an abstract thing. That's not a physical thing that can be measured or observed. It's very abstract. 15D. The evolutionary theory doesn't do a good job of explaining what the mind is, nor where we got our intelligence from. We can, like I said, we can measure the brains of different animals. We can measure the weight of the brain, the overall mass of a brain, the number of neurons in the brain, what a brain is composed of, etc. But we can't figure out for sure how the brain of any species developed, especially when it comes to sentience or sapience, including the Homo sapiens sapiens brain. Let alone we cannot determine what consciousness is or how something so powerful yet so abstract as the mind even evolved, or if it even evolved at all. It's like there's too many variables here that I think we're not looking into, while so many people just blindly, faithfully believe that this process actually happens. Again, there's not enough evidence for it. It's more like a religion. These type of observations have not yet gotten an adequate explanation, as far as I'm concerned, nor have these questions gotten an adequate enough answer to them. Yet we're told over and over that evolution explains everything about the origin of species and the diversity of these different species of organism here on planet Earth. Well, I say that explanation is not good enough. That's the end of this part of the series. So stay tuned for future installments. That's all for now. Please like, subscribe, share, and donate to support this channel. You all have a nice day. I'm out. Peace.